We're joined now by Washington Bureau Chief Craig Gilbert to talk about Governor Scott Walker's impending announcement this coming Monday, his formal rollout of his presidential campaign. So Craig, if we rolled back the clock 3 years, we would have been right in the midst of this recall, something that no other governor in the country had ever survived. How do we get from there to here for Scott Walker, where he's a very top-tier presidential contender?
Well, the recall has really turned out to be his great stepping stone to national politics. In fact, it's almost impossible to imagine him making this run for president without the recall. I mean, on lots of levels. It obviously brought him a donor base, it put him on the national map, and it kind of gave him a built-in message for Republican primary voters. In fact, his sort of, his bumper sticker slogan right now, which is that I'm a fighter and a winner, and you get both with me, is really unthinkable without the recall. The recall is his, great credential when it comes to winning political victories, and it's also his great credential when it comes to speaking to conservatives who want somebody who's going to fight for the things they really care about. So it's really the backbone of his campaign, and his campaign is views the recall as helping him communicate to Republican voters on all sorts of levels.
So on Monday, Governor Walker will be joining an ever-expanding field of Republican contenders. It's up somewhere in the 16 or 17 range now. Craig, does that size of a field, do you feel, help the governor or hurt the governor as he tries to distinguish himself among the other contenders?
Well, in one sense, it's easy for him to set himself apart in a big field because he is a governor. There aren't too many of those, and he has been through this unique kind of political history with the recall. On the other hand, you can see how having to compete with all these different candidates could be a problem for him, because one of his political strengths is that the polls show he can appeal across party lines. He can appeal to the establishment, he can appeal to the Tea Party, to evangelicals. And the bigger the field, the more Republicans he's competing with for each one of these groups of voters. So he's really competing with some candidates to the right of him and some candidates to the left of him, and he's trying to sort of find this sweet spot, but the danger for him is just kind of having to fight all these battles on different fronts at once.
All right, so let's look at it, sort of two lenses to this campaign. What our readers and viewers are seeing primarily is what's happening in Wisconsin, and that coverage is things like the governor's gone, the budget was difficult to get through, the open records issue that was just in the news. How is he being perceived at the national level, though? So people who are getting that national filter, how do you feel he's faring?
Well, I think you're going to see when he makes his announcement on Monday, he's going to be lavished with national attention, and that's primarily because within the national political community, he's regarded as one of 3 or possibly 4 Republican candidates who are most likely to get the nomination in the end. I mean, the others in that group would certainly include Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio and maybe 1 or 2 others. But he has that, stature now within the Republican field. I think the jury is still out from a national perspective on how well he'll perform as a candidate. Everybody has to sort of take their game to a new level when they're running for president. He's had some speed bumps and some hiccups along the way. People are still waiting to see kind of how he does as a candidate and whether he can kind of rise to that level. But again, I mean, he has the stature right now within the political community of being seen in the front rank of viable Republican candidates.
All right, so last question here, thinking ahead to the governor's speech on Monday evening, if you had one thing, if you wrote down on one note card for Governor Walker, this is the one thing you have to accomplish, what do you think that is for him on Monday?
Well, I think he has to show that he can be presidential. I think if you think about anyone who's running as governor, he's already shown that he can deliver a good speech. I think that was shown back in Iowa, and he sort of checked that box. But when you're a governor of a modest-sized Midwestern state running for president, I mean, you have to show that you're sort of big enough, personally big enough for the job. And so I think he needs to project that on Monday.
All right, we'll be back next week, and we can make that assessment of how the governor did. Thanks, Craig.
You're welcome.